this video, we are going to do PLC configuration. Now, PLC configuration is very important because it is the first thing that you need to do before you can start working with your PLC. So before you can start programming your PLC and get it to control a plant, you first need to configure your PLC. So when you work with controllers or smart systems, be it PLCs, microcontrollers, or field network masters, you must know that you need to start by downloading the configuration to these devices before you can start working on them. So when you buy a PLC, it is just an expensive piece of hardware, and it doesn't even know that it's a PLC. It cannot even recognize the I/O modules that can be connected to itself at that particular time. So in order to get it working, you need to configure it, and then you need to download that configuration to the PLC. Once it has been configured, your PLC will be healthy. This is just a term that is used a lot in industry. And once your PLC is healthy, you will be able to program it and get it to control your plant the way that you want it to work. So now let's just take a step back a bit. The config file, where do you get it and what does it have? You create the config file in the PLC software. The PLC software is installed on a typical computer that you use to program the PLC. When you work in industry, this computer is called the engineering workstation. So if someone ever says to you, "Take me to your engineering workstation," don't be confused. They mean the computer where you set up and program your PLCs. In the PLC software, you create the configuration and you program the PLC. There is more. The PLC software is a major topic and we will cover it on its own. But for now, that is what you need to know. You create the config in the PLC software. So when you create the PLC configuration, you specify certain parameters that the PLC has in order for it to work. What you can specify can depend on the PLC manufacturer, but 9 out of 10 times these will always be there for most PLCs. So when you create the config, here's what you usually specify. So you need to specify the CPU or controller, its model, its firmware revision, as well as the PLC's network address. Then you need to specify the inputs and outputs. And if the PLC has local I/O, you need to specify that. You need to specify the number of cards as well as the model of those cards. Sometimes even firmware revision is important, but this can depend on the manufacturer of that PLC. And if your PLC has remote I/O, you need to specify that as well. That also includes the types of cards that you have there, the number of cards as well as their model. And then field networks as well need to be specified in the PLC's configuration if the PLC is going to be using any field networks. You don't really have to remember this. I will drill down on this when we do an example of setting up a PLC in software. So the main idea that you need to understand from this is that most of the things that you set up in the PLC config are mostly hardware related. It's like telling a baby that you have legs for walking, ears for listening, hands for touching, and etc. It is stuff about its physical features, but it goes into their software, which is the brain. So the idea is the same with the PLC configuration. The configuration needs to be loaded to the PLC so that the PLC can work. And once the configuration has been loaded to the PLC can be able to recognize all the hardware devices that are connected to it and that it can control. And when the configuration has been successfully loaded to the PLC will be healthy and be ready to be programmed and control the plant.